to get out of town and get some much-deserved relaxation and rest. But I want to point out that tomorrow is more than just a day to grill out and veg out and listen to Creedence Clearwater Revival. There's 3 times of the year, I think, where that's allowed. Some holidays are given, right? Some are earned. And Labor Day was earned. I kind of think of it as a UU High Holy Day. Because it's more than a day off. It's a memorial to the power of an organized people. It is a memorial to the disenfranchised who took responsibility and stood up to systems of abuse. It is quintessentially American in that it celebrates the virtue of self-determination and acknowledges that work is as important as capital, that investing in community is as valuable as investing in commodities, and that democracy is as fragile a creature as it is mighty, and that it needs to represent all the people if it is to exist at all. So therein you hear individual worth, you hear interconnection, you hear democracy, and that is straight out of our principles. That's why I say it's a high holy day for us. It's a memorial, Labor Day is, and it's a celebration of these ideals and of the men and women who worked and sacrificed, sometimes sacrificed their lives to deliver them to us. And more than at any time since its establishment, we now need a moment to reflect on what Labor Day means. We need this because the men and women who worked and sacrificed for their ideals of fairness, human dignity, and self-worth in the face of legally sanctioned systems opposed to such values. They did such a good job of fighting that fight that we have now forgotten their cause. Ironically, on Labor Day, we have forgotten their work. Now, there are some determined, heroic few who have continued in the tradition of organizing and done so with great integrity. And I'm not talking now about just labor organizing, but rather also all kinds of political organizing that with truth speak power to power, speaks power with one another to power over one another. And power over, that power which seeks to have power over instead of power with, because power over never leaves history, we need these organizations that seek power for and power with to rise up again and adjust the increasingly imbalanced use of power in our country. We need to invest ourselves in them in order to return our country from a plutocracy teetering on fascism to a truly representative democracy. And this fight needs fighting all the way from DC to your locality. So with that, I'll introduce you to Sarah Lanius, co-founder of Keep Tucson Together, who as an organizer can bring you the perspective of lived experience.
Good morning. Good morning. It's great to see all of you. Ron asked me to share a little bit about how I understand the power of organizing. And that is a rather lengthy topic, so I'm going to give you my one-sentence response, which is every positive social change has come from people working together, often against all odds, to make their lives a little more humane, a little more loving, a little more dignified. The form and content changes depending on the context, and certainly we can and should take note of the varying approaches and specific outcomes. But for me, organizing really centers on that element of people working together and the process of beginning to understand their shared, even if differently configured, stakes involved. For the last 10 years, I've been involved in various efforts in and around Tucson, focused on immigrant rights and racial justice, And it has been through my relationship with others that I think that I've learned much of what I know about the power of organizing. My partner, Jeff Boyce, is here with me today, as you well know, and Jeff regularly will tell me around the kitchen table that everything worth having has been fought for. That the ability to live a life of dignity comes through collective organizing efforts. My friend Cesar, who is a longtime organizer with a local Chicano youth organization called Tierra Libertad, told me years ago that the reason that he has worked tirelessly to organize on behalf of his neighborhood and to build grassroots knowledge in local food systems and economic justice was because, quote, if we don't do it, no one else will. His statement has always stuck with me, in large part to understand that organizing at its very best must involve education, creativity, but also a lot of courage. To recognize that our relationship with one another and the ability to place our faith in the strength, capability, and wisdom of those around us and those whom we love. I've also had the honor of learning from elders like Margot Cowan, who is the lead attorney both on Rosa's sanctuary case, which I think many of you know about, and a co-founder of Keep Tucson Together, the free immigration legal clinic that we co-founded. Margot and her wife, Guadalupe Castillo, started filing asylums for Central Americans who were fleeing violence from death squads. And they were doing this out of the El Centro Detention Center long before Margot was ever an attorney and before the sanctuary movement in the 1980s came into being. Margot and Lupe often remind me that while sometimes history repeats itself, the power to push the edge and the inspiration to be bold comes from the bonds that people form. They often tell me that what made the difference in opening up new legal avenues for asylum seekers were the conversations that they had around the kitchen table with families from very different places. That those connections, those stories became the topic of conversation in towns and cities across the US. Judges and elected officials would hear these stories from their neighbors, and slowly the hard categories of us and them began to break down. The stakes involved came to be situated in personal and familial relationships. What began as an intellectual commitment of well-meaning but disconnected individuals transformed into a powerful, lived commitment of the heart to ensure that justice would be done. Thank you.
We'll hear more from Sarah in a moment. You know, I like that nothing worth having ever happened was achieved without a fight. I'll take it one step further back down the line. I think nothing worth having ever happened without commitment. And I see Sarah and the folks over at Southside are so committed to their current mission. It's really inspiring. And so right now, I would like us to commit to sing a song. You have to take baby steps. And we'll take baby steps towards